Bonjour mes amis, ciao a tutti, grüezi, allegra, bundi. Mein Name ist Tobias Jundt aus Gümligen bei Bern und ich bin ein Vagabund. Venez, venez. I decided to, I knew that this was going to be what I do for the rest of my life 31 years ago. That is not that long, but it's half a lifetime. It's when I was 6 years old, I just clearly remember the moment when I was like, this is what I want to do and this is what I will do in whatever form. And still to this day, I think there will be new forms in how I will do music. But it's been 30 years now and lots of different phases that I go through and pick one musical language to express myself. But there are probably more phases to come that will be radically different from something before. But when I was 6, I colored the keys of my piano. It's not this one, unfortunately. And so every key had like different colors or different patterns on it. And this is how I would do notation, which for many years seemed like I was a little weird doing this. But then now with the computers, or in the 90s when I started using the computers to do notation, there is one matrix where you also do colors, and depending on the color or the lengths, it's you notate music like this instead of the classic notation, which I also learned, of course. But in somehow the way lots of people work in the computers now is how I did this in the 80s when I was a kid. So music was very present in the house I grew up because my father was one of the founding members of introducing Swiss language into, let's say, popular music. Because in Bern there was a scene in the 60s of some guys who loved Brassens and the French chanson. They started doing these kind of chansons in Swiss German. And the Zurich Verlag was the label that did this. There's one famous member from this scene who is Mani Matter. And funny enough, he's kind of the only one who's still known or transformed into the digital age from all these chansonniers. And my father was in the same time on the same label doing the same thing, just a very different type of chanson. It was more melancholy and a bit more political. Well, Mani Matter was very political too. But so music was always a very present thing in our home. And I think through a bit of a mistake, I started playing classical guitar. I didn't want to do that. I think I just kind of misunderstood something. So my first lessons were classical piano and classical guitar, which I didn't enjoy so much. I like the composing of it, always. Like, yes, it's 31 years in my head. To me, music is about creation. And I think that's also the reason I never became a virtuoso on anything, really. If I became a virtuoso in something musical, it's the idea. So the fact that you look at yourself as a creator of something new, or to take something that was there and transform it to something new. So that's, to me, every instrument has always been just a means to get to some sort of creation. And so because I started classical and I kept looking for something else with a different or freedom of expression, and I discovered quite early on, I discovered jazz. And so I had a really intense early teenage phase, just traveling every day after school. I mean, if I look at it now, being a grown-up, if I look at what I did, I was a madman. Like every day I wanted to meet the people who created jazz in the time when I thought jazz was hot. And so that's what I did. Like every day I traveled just to, you know, discover meet these people, and because in Switzerland you could. That's the crazy thing. I realized now that I was very lucky in the 90s to be able to meet all the legends of jazz. Everyone, they were alive and they came to Switzerland because they were respected there, and there was good money as well for them. So that was another period, and then at one point I realized I had to just kind of like be more of a recluse, and I think probably for a couple of years I didn't really leave my room for much else than food, and just started recording. So the translation of, so how do you capture things and layer things, and so I did a lot of recording, and well, so on. There was many different phases of things that I tried, and then I think the phase that most people are aware of now is 10 years ago when I left Switzerland, actually, because until then everything was really just happening in very small circles in Switzerland. When I left Switzerland and I decided to be Bonaparte, to become the emperor of this musical idea that I had to make music something physical. I wanted to make a split of something that is at the same time very physical and very intellectual. And you could either see both or you don't. But to do this kind of split. And so this was a new phase of kind of songs that I wrote, and especially the early Bonaparte songs, they had a bit of not a dogma, but an idea behind it, how I wrote pop songs that work as such, but they are different. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm in constant change and exploring things that to my musical world seem interesting at the moment. Oui, bien sûr, on peut parler de la Suisse. Also ja, für mich ist die Schweiz natürlich Sprache. Ja, to grow up in Switzerland, it's normal that there are different languages. It's although if you look at Switzerland from outside, it might not look as a politically diverse and open country, but it still is in a sense, because there's a lot of mixture and a lot of different ideas that kind of coexist in Switzerland. So growing up in Switzerland, to me, language is a big thing. J'adore parler français, but I'm not French. You know, the Italian, some people know I write in any language, whether I speak the language or not. And that, I think, is definitely a Swiss thing, to just accept that there's different languages and you can just use them and do stuff with them, communication. The same with genres to me. For me, I really do not exist in genres. It was very hard, or still is hard for me to exist in any kind of genre. I simply don't look at the world like this. I even don't look at the world in terms of boundaries. Like, even if I look at the world in the future of our world, I think temporarily there will be more boundaries, and then one day they'll probably be gone because we can't afford them. And in music, I never worked within boundaries. It doesn't make sense to me. I acknowledge that there's different ways of looking at music or approaching music. You know, the whole field of classical music or jazz music or popular music or folk music. It's all different approaches, you know, but in the end, it's similar emotions. And I do think for me that being Swiss has a lot to do with this. I miss Switzerland a lot, and I speak English because that's the language I chose to write my songs. I speak English with my wife and my kids. It's not that I as I said, for me, there's no language that we speak perfect, not even Berndeutsch. Ja, ich rede sicher kein perfektes Berndeutsch, aber ich bin geboren in Bern und habe 27 Jahre dort gelebt, aber es gibt kein perfektes Berndeutsch. What is the perfect Swiss German? No one knows. I have the dictionary at home, the famous Swiss. There is no one way, and I miss Switzerland a lot, but at the same time, it's beautiful to have this thing called Heimat and to not be there. That Heimat is something that you long for, that you can go visit, and something that you carry along with you, And when I play in Russia or China or New Zealand or anywhere, I become even more the Swiss boy who is performing music somewhere else. It's always, to me, so everything is in relation to me being Swiss, of course. Yes, I miss the language, I miss the smells, I miss a lot of it. But for me, musically, it is good to be on the run, so to say. It is good to be out there, because my music is always a reaction, and it's just really good to put myself in different positions. Switzerland can get a little I don't know, not claustrophobic, but it's just good to go in and out, So I never really wanted to go to Berlin. So 10 years ago, I remember saying, it's over, don't need to go to Berlin. That's, So I was driving around in my little Fiat, with which I left Switzerland. I lived in this car for about a year. That was my address, was my home. And I just drove around and just, to me, home is really to immerse in music, and music is kind of internal. So to me, it doesn't really matter where I am. It's a weird thing, because Switzerland is Heimat. That will never change, But all the other places, it's just places. They can inspire, or you can write about it, or they can do things with you. And Berlin was really I got an invitation for one show here, actually the first Bonaparte show, funny enough. And the reason I stayed in Berlin was the space. It was very easy to have space to create, to put up all my machines that I've collected over the years, So in these rooms here, and there's more rooms that you don't see, I have all these machines and things because they can all do one sound. And I love old machines that can only do one thing, but they can do this thing better than anyone ever. These little moments in time when someone invented something. So that was great, the fact that I could have space here to put up my machines and just work on my music. And the most important fact of coming here, could have been any city, but is to be no one, to be nobody, to have a reset of no one knows me. I can be anyone I want to be. I can try something, or I can just not pretend, but I can just say, this is what I do now, this is who I am, and then this influences your music again. And sometimes to go somewhere and be no one is a really empowering thing, also for you musically, and to stay in the same place can be very difficult. And so this free space was just really amazing about Berlin. The fact that there's so many Swiss people here doesn't really bother me, because I don't really see them, to be honest. Of course, lots of people who move here, they call me or write to me, can you help me with this, can you help me with that? Like, okay, every 2 weeks there's a Swiss person moving here, a Swiss artist, and they have questions. How can you help me? How do I do this? So of course we help each other as a community, but I don't, I mean, I meet some of them, like Sophie Hunger. Now that she moved here, of course we exchange and we meet each other, and so there's a few of them. But there's even some Swiss musicians. Lots of people don't even know they live here. I understand, you know, that people move from Switzerland move here because it's relatively easier as a musician, I guess, than in Zurich or Bern, where everything is so expensive. But I think the fact that Switzerland is so expensive is in fact a huge problem why not so many Swiss artists are actually active outside of Switzerland. You know, you get used to a kind of life that is amazing, it's great, but it's a standard that is very hard to compete with if you perform outside of Switzerland. And I guess many people choose Berlin because it's close and it's not so expensive. But I don't know, I don't think about it so much. I don't think it's so interesting. Well, I was in New Zealand, in Paikakariki, and because of the time change, it was, I used to get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning to write arrangements, looking at a mountain, waiting for the sun to come up, because this was the moment I wanted to write. And so in this weird moment, because of time change, there was this call from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and I wasn't really sure if I did something that I shouldn't have, or if they needed a new president. Like, ja, Altbundesrat Ogi? Nein, ich bin gerade im Interview. So, when they told me what it was about, it was amazing. I had to look it up, of course, and I was like, that the fact that this even exists is also very Swiss. It's pretty crazy. If I tell people around it, in the world about this prize, they can't really believe that it exists, but it's there. Switzerland has a long history of cultural support. You know, we're lucky in that sense, and it is a good thing. I think it's just really important what you do with it. As an artist, you really, if you make use of the cultural support system, you really have to make use of it, and not just use it to make your life more simple, but to really go out there and try to do things that you could not do, because in other countries it just simply doesn't exist, not on this scale. I think it's beautiful they choose 15 people in a democratic sense of, different places, different genres, different, it's a very democratic selection. It's very difficult, I guess, to pin one person and say, and now this is the winner. Well, that's a little difficult, because how it's every one of these people, and you could do it for 100 years, and all of these 15 people are so different, and they live a life connected to their art that each and every of these lives are worth to give the major prize. I look at it as a cultural support from the government to say, to acknowledge that culture is something important, and I think that is really important. Also, if you look at other regimes in the world now, that is a very important language, and that, to be honest, makes me proud to be Swiss. To be, to know that this is a profession that is actually acknowledged as something important to our culture, and I think that's beautiful. That's why I can accept it. Otherwise, I would go against it and say, non, j'accepte pas. I don't want this prize from my government because I am revolutionary. But I can accept it because it's a wonderful thing. I just really think that people need to then not get lazy through this cultural support system, but to actually use it as an empowering factor and go out and do the stuff you couldn't have done otherwise, you know. So that's my only hope, that, you know. But I think the kind of people they choose there, they're all like in it hardcore, so there is no problem with this kind of price. These people are like, they're going hard and always will. Well, there's a bit of a rule in my life that, for one part, I don't talk ever about half of the things I do. You know, I just don't. Doing it is what's interesting to me. To talk about it is always feels like promotion. I like doing stuff more than talk about it. Now, of course, some stuff you talk about, but I have a bit of a rule that I want to talk about it when it's done. Now, in this interview, obviously, it's interesting to, you know, kind of daydream about the things that I do or plan on doing, and probably only half of them will ever happen. I do have projects and collaborations that I did already that will eventually be released. One is very Berlin-based with Kid Simios, a Spanish producer who did a lot in the German hip-hop scene. And that was interesting because if two producers come together, because normally I produce my music alone. Yeah, like the new Bonaparte record I'm about to finish, it's really just me. I produce, I play the instruments, I write this. It's a quite the incest. It's a process, artistically speaking. So when two producers come together, it's cool because I can take one part of the process and he can take the other. So this is one project. Another one in a pipeline is with Bela B from the Ärzte, which is more than not electronic at all. It's really basic kind of more of a punk energy, I'd say. I do want to do a Bonaparte big band that is in its core acoustic jazz, but not really in its sound. But that's just one of my dreams that I'm working for years. I do want to do orchestra things with Bonaparte, because I as a teenager I wrote a lot for orchestras, and in Switzerland it is crazy. I had the chance that, you know, Jost Meyer would actually perform pieces I wrote as a kid. You know, where do you get that? But Switzerland has all these opportunities and programs that you can really make use of. So this, I really want to do more in the orchestra sense. The new Bonaparte record I worked on is also going in a bit of a different direction, more mellow and horns actually on every track. That was a bit of a secret. And yeah, there's just things I've always wanted to do with certain instruments or certain collaborations that I have kind of lined up, and you know, whenever the opportunity arises, I'm going to do them. I have another thing that I've been working on for 10 years that has to do with the Swiss language, actually. And I don't know if this is ever going to be done. And I don't want to say too much about it. But yeah, it's been forever. And it has to do with my cultural heritage of where I grew up in Gümligen. And Gümligen is a little village outside of Bern. That's where I'm from. Yep. So yeah, as you said, I'm just, you know, I can only do one at a time. And I also recently decided that I not only want to be a musician, I also want to be human. It's quite a new concept for me to actually be just an ordinary person, and you know, that it obviously comes through me becoming a family man. So I go at it a bit different. I have this huge list of dreams and desires of projects I want to do, but I just take them as they come. Some I will never be able to do. That's okay. And some I will. But I don't want to sacrifice being human as much as I used to. So it feels actually pretty good, you know, the inspiration of being an artist and being just a human being. So we'll see.